Thanks very much for this opportunity again. I've got about 10, 15 minutes. So there'll be a bit of a sort of a light touch on a lot of this. So please, with the questions afterwards, if you want a bit of clarification, say. Apologies if we're going over ground that people know. Nail, like you said there, you've been working with us a long time. You know a lot of this. And some of you were at the site visit we had last year or the year before. So again, you know, there's some of this information is being repeated. But anyway, look, what the focus is today is trying to pull out on these nature-based solutions and the connections that are sort of needed and trying to reflect that in what we've been doing. So just give you, again, just for those that don't know our area or we're only up once, but here we are. Carlingford Lock is down to the just the bottom here, southwest. And then the blue line is really the area of outstanding natural beauty, which is the boundary within which the Mourne Heritage Trust operates. We're a non-statutory body. We're funded by central government, by DERA, by Niles people, and also the local authority in the area, and then project funding and tourism funding. Our remit stretches across conservation, ecology, tourism development, farming, you know, the broad remit. We have 57,000 hectares, again, includes mountain, but also woodland and countryside and coast. Albeit we've got a lot of coast, our main focus is really on the uplands. That's sort of really been where the sort of, I suppose, that a lot of the support has been there for us to drive a lot of these projects and the work that we do. And in some ways, I suppose, dealing with the uplands, you're in effect affecting the wider catchment anyway. And also the land ownership in this area is very broken up with small farms, very much in the lowlands and the coastal areas. So you tend to go where maybe your bigger landowners are, so you get a bigger hit. And for us, you know, and the focus of the Mournes is the uplands, is the mountains. It's known for its mountains, and that is owned primarily by Northern Ireland Water. So a lot of the work that we do is working in areas like that, which will be the focus on what I'm looking at today. So this is typical view of up in the mountains. It's this area, which is in the eastern Mournes. It's designated as a special area of conservation, an area of special scientific interest, primarily for its wet and dry heath communities, which you can see a lot of heather there in flower. It's an important water catchment. You can see two major reservoirs there, Ben Crom and Silent Valley, that were built in the 30s and the 50s, 1950s. Farmers, it's a major farming area with upland grazing, with primarily mountain sheep. Huge recreation importance there. As you can imagine, you know, one of the most popular and easily accessible mountain ranges in Ireland, and obviously in Northern Ireland. Has the highest mountain in Northern Ireland, so huge attraction for people using it. And obviously a big carbon sink as well. There's primarily sort of relatively shallow peat soils, but some deep peat as well. So it's delivering a whole range of ecosystem services. So the thing I wanted to look at today, as I say, were how nature-based solutions have been developed here and the connections that are needed for those. And I'll look at 4 examples that we've done: the heathland restoration, erosion control, which is primarily where people are walking really, and the impact and how to mitigate that. Wildfire mitigation, and that's just a huge agenda at the minute, as we say, globally. And native woodland development as well. On these issues, I think the thing to really say is, did we approach them by intentionally employing a nature-based solution as the baseline, or did we see an environmental impact and simply want to try and fix it? And I think more the latter, because given the context around the timescale of when we started out on this, you know, again, as we were talking earlier, the resources that were available to us, we were maybe not thinking by default nature-based solutions, but at the end of the day, to be able to achieve good results, it has to be holistic. So that was always our aspiration. And so, you know, by default, really, they are working towards nature-based solutions without the policy and strategic support for that, though. That's the key thing. Okay, so looking at heath and restoration, this slide shows the type of habitat up in the high Mournes in certain areas. You can see degraded peat, degraded peat and breaking peat areas is typical of upland heathlands and peatlands, but it's made worse by things like overburning, overgrazing, climate change, disturbance from people using it, erosion and things like this. And so it tips it beyond the natural balance of areas breaking up and rebuilding. And this is what we're seeing now. So what we did is we did some survey work, habitat surveys. We worked with Mournes for the Future to get information on best practice. And we decided to sort of do some pilot work in about 30 hectares. You can see the typical type of environment we're working in. Here, these students are the youth rangers that we have a program through the summer, and we train them up in different environmental activities, obviously building their knowledge and skills going further forward in the industry, hopefully. And this is them reprofiling a degrading peat bank so that it becomes less steep and it won't continue to erode and become sustainable then. The funding for this project came from the Heritage Lottery funds, and the project was for about 4 years. And just some more slides showing some of the other items and activities that we were doing. The top left, you can see a degraded area with basically the gravel substrate now completely exposed. And here's a couple of our team working there, and you can see that sort of sausage type thing lying on the ground. It's basically a roll of coir material, which is basically coconut husks in a jute netting bag, sausage, which you basically place on the ground like that, and it creates a dam. It's that simple. Other techniques at Dungonall have been done with RSPB, where they've blocked up deep peat areas that have been drained, but that's just by shuttering the channels there, whereas we didn't have so much opportunity for this. So it was bringing in material like this to create dams. And then just on the right-hand side, you can see the sort of gravel area in the front. And then beyond that, you can see the wet standing area with plants growing in it. And that's what starts to happen when you put these barriers or these bunds in place. It holds the water, slows it down, holds the substrate, the soil, from washing off, and gives the plants, the seed everywhere, the chance to start growing again, and then holding these soils and rebuilding the plant ecology that is there in wetland areas. So cotton grasses, sphagnum mosses, and things like that, which are really key for rebuilding these habitats. And it can be quite simple, really. So, we saw a very quick change in these habitats. The bottom right picture shows you almost like a couple of dams, like we saw earlier, these man-made dams. Well, these are sort of almost rebuilding natural dams with the water being held. And what will happen is you'll find that the sediment starts to build up over the first year or two, and it's almost like very loose sand when you put your hand in. But after about 3 or 4 years, the sediment becomes really tight and well knitted together, and you can start seeing how things rebuild. The bottom left, you can see sort of a light brown area. That's actually jute netting, which is laid across a reprofiled peat bank where we haven't enough vegetation to recover it. And it allows the soil, it keeps the soil in one place and allows the plants to start growing back through there. Key thing here is how we sustain this, how we keep the maintenance of it. We've got to work with academic institutions, do some survey work on here. And it's a pilot, very much a pilot, to see how this works. But you have to try something in your landscapes, on your soils, to actually really work out what the best way forward is. We could look at what's happening in the mainland UK and the Peak District, but our area is slightly different. So we do need to try these things and get support for that. So erosion control, this again, as I was saying, just trying to deal with the impact on the ground from people walking primarily. You see there, this is up on Slieve Binion, which is one of the highest mountains in the Mournes. And then on the bottom right is after the work, reducing that wide scar, which was about 10 meters, down to less than a meter wide, and allowing the soil and the habitat to recover. Upland access is getting more and more and more, particularly through COVID. More people have gone locally, and the impact on the local areas, including places like this, have just gone through the roof 2 or 3-fold. So we're going to have more of this to deal with. And the picture here now shows volunteers on the left, students working with us, and on the right, a group from Norway that came across and worked with us to learn what was happening. The logo on the top right is the Ascent project, which was basically about bringing together international examples of where this impact and loading on sensitive upland areas was happening in many places. So Norway's one, Iceland, Finland, and Ireland as well in Donegal, and trying to share experience and the connections is really key. And it worked brilliantly because we worked together. As you see, these Norwegians came across and worked with us. And you can see sheep wool there, which is down as the substrate over the deep peat and keeps the aggregate path from washing down into the peat soils, and is a better alternative to man-made teram or fabric. Okay, so wildfire prevention, huge issue at the moment. There's 2011, we had huge fires in Ireland and the UK, and then ongoing, we've had years now where we've had big spate conditions. We're seeing, the global situation that we see, in the States and Siberia that we're seeing. This is something typical now in our areas as well. Not quite the same impact, but it's building, so we need to prepare. One of the things we did was work with Fire and Rescue Service, Environment Agency, and Northern Ireland Water, the main landowner here, to get some consultants from Catalonia and Northumberland to come and analyse our site and identify where the main risks were, given the worst, say, spate condition of dry periods with heavy winds, and where to maybe build protection within the landscape. And we learned to do some prescribed burning at key gateways to sort of try and block the flow of a fire and protect the next sort of area of land. But the issue of what you actually do to intervene needs to be further explored. We maybe need to use re-wetting areas as a tool to prevent wildfires traveling through deep peat areas and things like that, as opposed to prescribed burning. So, there's the key thing is we need to start learning together now. And one of the things in restoration of degraded peat, or when you're trying to rebuild areas and the grass is coming back in, or you've had a fire and you're trying to push the habitat back to favourable condition to what it is the right grazing regime. Now, there is one size fits all at the moment, maybe, 5 sheep per hectare and things like this. And in the Mournes at the minute, cattle are banned because of the risk of disease spread. But for the appropriate grazing management, we really need a combination of cattle and mountain sheep. We need to be able to load a site, maybe with 15, 20, 30 sheep per hectare, and then pull them off. So it's got to be very bespoke to learn actually what happens in your habitats in recovering ground to best manage these sites. The other thing is the liaison with the farming community. So as they're doing with the Hen Harrier project across Ireland, we're seeing the demand now potentially for premium meat products where cattle like this are grazed in the upland areas, and their farmers can then sell a premium price for their meat. So in effect, what we have is a premium meat grazing machine. And that's the sort of networks and connections that we need to look at going forward. And then our native woodland program, we collect provenance and grow provenance trees. We collect seed from local oak, hazel woodlands, and we plant conservation woodland. We're not pushing silviculture so much. And what we do is we offer the trees free of charge to local farmers who can plant in broad spacing and still get their single farm payment to graze their sheep. So they're not losing out on that, and they don't have to change their current practices. However, going forward, we have a very strong relationship now with the Woodland Trust, who have a much more broader remit, obviously across the whole of the province and the UK. And we're looking at a partnership of having a shared post based in the Mournes area to really push this and work with using the Woodland Grant Scheme as well, alongside our what we call Trees for Mourne project. So to summarise off that very quick fire through here, what's needed we see going forward is a recognition that those above projects that we had evidence a holistic approach as best we could within the constraints that the strategic approach wasn't there, or the strategic background wasn't there for us. We really need to have the main landowners engaged. Now, that's been achieved piecemeal in a way, but we do need that main strategic buy-in through policy from the public, government departments, landowners, environmental NGOs like the National Trust in our area, and obviously RSPB more broadly, and private mountain trustees too. It must be easier for them to participate with us through the single farm payment and other things like that. We need to see best practice and innovation supported again by funding and government departments so we can explore the best options for our sites. We need that ongoing monitoring and research to prove what's happening locally and in these pilots of what we do. We can't just say, well, it worked elsewhere, so it's going to work here. Because people will say, well, how is it working on your ground? So we need to prove that. And we need that government leadership, obviously, behind this, and the acceptance, obviously, of nature-based solutions as your modus operandi of going forward. One thing I would say also, too, there is that, most of what we have done because of the fact of the lack of the strategic background, with the piecemeal approach, all the stars really do need to align for you to be able to achieve that type of approach, the holistic approach. But usually there is a spanner in the works. And so it's always limited, or it stutters to the outcome of what you're trying to achieve, albeit you can achieve significant results. And one of the examples might be that we have the grazing that you saw there. We tried to bring in grazing to the land, but because the farmer that had the contract felt that he was being denied payments on his grazing contract that he had, and wouldn't allow additional bespoke grazing using other livestock on the land. So we couldn't do the grazing that we needed further on to build on it. Simple things like that can get the problem. The strategic approach means obviously that the job is already half done. You're pushing an open door, and there is a willingness there, albeit you might get some characters that hold you back a little bit, but you're moving forward together then.